and I'm a grateful, recovering sex and love addict. And it is such an honor to be with you all today. And thank you so much, Mira, for inviting me to this meeting. So when Mira reached out to me a couple of months ago, or so it seems, she asked me if I would talk on no contact. And I said, yes, this is such a hot topic. And then I see her flyer that wasn't that gorgeous, everyone. I mean, that just like drew me in. And it says, the joy of no contact. Let me just say, it's a bait and switch, okay? It should say the pain, the suffering, the pull your hair out insanity of no contact, because that's what it's like at first. And so I don't mean in any way to be cavalier about this topic, but no contact is so critical to our recovery in SLAA. And the thing with no contact is it's how you get your life back. It's how I got my life back. And I've had multiple situations in recovery to go no contact. So I really want to clarify, first of all, I am a Skid Row sex and love addict. I always say I lead with love addiction. However, the relationship that got me into the program, the first time I went one time, 14 years before my current sobriety. And I've been sober for 9 years and about 3 months and a few days and a few hours. I remember it vividly. But my flagship qualifier is my ex-husband, my second ex-husband. There've only been two, and the father of my son. And so that relationship was potentially deadly. And I gotta say that not to be dramatic, but at that time in the United States, there was a comedian, Phil Hartman, and his wife killed him. And then she shot herself in the middle of the night while their two kids, like 5 and 8, were in the other room. And the problem with that, in addition to what's obvious, was that I related to that. That was when the worst of my marriage was crumbling. And it was the horrific despair of an active sex and love addict called me. And so fortunately, I went to the one meeting, but I couldn't relate because it wasn't a women's meeting. And that's why I'm such an advocate for women's meetings. We need to be together. I need to hear your story. So I didn't relate to the conversations about pornography and masturbation and massage parlors and those kinds of things. And so I said, I'm not that sick yet. But when I eventually came back, 14 years later, I realized that the insanity of life hanging around and being with other sex and love addicts. We tend to attract other sex and love addicts. We tend to be in relationship with them. And so that's what I was. And so going no contact was really, really important. So I also want to underscore that the way we look at no contact in Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous is not a strategy to get the person back. Does everybody understand? I'd like to see heads shaking. This is not a dating strategy to get someone back. The only strategy this is to get you back so that you meet yourself possibly for the very first time. And so the times that I've had to go no contact were with that flagship qualifier, my ex-husband and my son's father, and very destructive relationship. And I was in the thick of sex and love addiction at its worst. And I'm so grateful to say that that kind of intensity, that's one of our kind of characteristics, is intensity and drama, I cried more in my 5 years that I was married to that man than probably the rest of my life all put together, because I was constantly triggered, constantly triggered. So some of you have heard me say that there are 5 kinds of men that I don't date, and you shouldn't either. During the quarantine, this is changing because I've realized that friends and family can be qualifiers. And there are certain friends and family that we need to not be around. So I've changed it. I've added one to the 6 kinds of people we avoid at all costs, if possible: cheaters, liars, abusers, users, losers, and confusers. If somebody wants to put that in the chat, that would be awesome. So we're going no contact with people that are triggering and compromising our sanity and our serenity and our connection to our higher power. Like, the most important thing for us in recovery is our connection to our higher power. Does everybody understand that? Wave your hands. This isn't, we don't come to SLAA to learn how to date so that we can get the guy or girl. Has everybody got that? This is not a place. We do sober dating, and I love all the sober dating workshops that we do. And our sober dating booklet is our best selling booklet, and it's so worth the money to buy it. So we do focus on sober dating, but this 12-step program is not to learn how to date to get anybody. A lot of people come here and they get relief, and then they go out. They go, oh, I've got this. I'm going to take what I've got, these golden nuggets that I learned in these 5 meetings, and I'm going to go date better now. I'm going to go date better. I don't need to keep going to these meetings. I don't need to work all those steps like those people do to really get this. I'm going to go on. And so what we have to remember is that if you've taken step 1, like literally taken step 1, and you know you're powerless over your sex and love addiction, and that your life is unmanageable. Like, when you write your step 1 and you go into how powerless you are, mine was shocking how powerless I was over my sex and love addiction and how unmanageable my life was. So once you take that step, the only solution is our connection to a higher power and the rest of the 11 steps that follow it. There's no other thing we have to offer you. There's nothing else we have to offer you. So we have to understand addiction. Like, this is addiction. This isn't a dating problem. This isn't a relationship problem. This is an addiction. So once we get to that point, and then we've got somebody who is triggering us, then we go no contact. And so I did that with my flagship qualifier, and he was the father of my child. So there's ways that we have to go no contact with people that we still have to be in contact with. And that was that nothing that didn't have to be said, was said beyond, like, I didn't want my son to see, okay, these 2 people can't even talk. So I would talk and I would do my best to have a friendship. But when those arguments started and, when he would just launch a bomb, it was like, don't respond. And that's called gray rock. Gray rock is, it's not a part of a 12-step program, but it's a very important communication tool to understand that we meditate. And I happen to have my flashcards here, and I love my little flashcards. So we meditate to be able to stay centered and in touch with ourselves so that we're not constantly triggered by people. And so I was a chaser. Like, I thought it was so liberating to chase guys. And so if I'd met them online, I thought it was so cool to call the next day and, see if we wanted to get together again. And so part of no contact was also something that we don't talk about very often. And that is like not initiating all this contact that I was doing to just get what I call LAVA, love, attention, validation, and approval. So love, attention, validation, and approval. And so being able to take back our power means being able to look at ourselves as intentionally autonomous women. Like that's the goal, to learn how to be an intentionally autonomous woman. Not those times where you just have a dry spell. Anybody have a dry spell where you're not dating and you're not, like I was celibate for 4 years, but it wasn't by choice, so we're wanting intentionally autonomous, become intentionally autonomous women. So if you imagine walking into a room that's got a lot of electrical outlets and you're the plug-in, you're the plug. And so we walk into, this is all men or women, whichever you're attracted to the most. We're walking into this room with all of these receptacles and we're just plugging into anybody. Like that's our addiction. That's our love, attention, validation, and approval. So that's what we're doing. And so at first, we do our best to have no contact with people we would be attracted to begin with. So a lot of times you'll hear in the heterosexual community that we have no contact with men, just in general, even friendships. We're not trying to start new friendships. I've got a few great legitimate friends who are men, but even in recovery, I have to check and double check. Am I calling them to say hi, or am I calling them to get some sort of lava from them, even though they're friends? So we kind of go on a no contact with people that we would be attracted to. And so this no contact, what it does for us is that it is a commitment to ourselves and to our true higher self to begin to regain our life back, to stop the madness. So, and it's a commitment to healing. Like we can't heal as long as somebody keeps going in there and reopening the wound, right? Like when you're trying to have contact with someone who was a crazy maker to you in the beginning, like all of those wounds just keep getting opened and opened and opened. And so we want to regain our commitment to ourselves and to our healing. And so it's a demonstration of us facing the reality about these qualifiers, and it's a commitment to accepting it. So part of our disease is fantasy. Anybody relate? Like the fantasy, thank you. The fantasy isn't, when we talk about fantasy, people think, oh, are they imagining all these sexual blah, blah, blah. No, that's not the kind of fantasy I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind of fantasy where we turn somebody into, in our minds, the man we want them to be. They aren't that man at all, but we try to project that onto them. And then when it doesn't happen, then we're the ones who get really bent out of shape. And so it's a no contact is a commitment to facing the reality about someone. Like we can't face reality while we're engaging of all this high intensity, high drama. And it's usually very negative, like somebody who's one of those cheaters, abusers, users, losers, confusers, and liars. It's usually somebody like that gets us in here. And so I want to share with you an experience that happened in my second sober dating relationship. And, what sober dating does, first of all, it's the biggest oxymoron for us ever. Like sober dating is hard. So people who come in and they want to jump right into sober dating, like slow down, because this is not a joyride. Trust me. It was when I began sober dating that I really saw how bad my disease was. I really saw how even with, a year and the steps, under my belt, and sometimes many more years as I've continued to. I've had 6 sober relationships and 6 sober breakups. And so I was in Rome with my son. Doesn't that sound glamorous? So we're in Rome, and I just started dating someone. This was at Thanksgiving time, and I had just started dating them in August. And with our time difference and the holidays, he and I were like agreeing to talk. Thank you. I'm sorry, say that again.
That's 15 minutes.
Thank you. And so we were agreeing to talk at a certain time with the time difference from Rome to California. And then he wasn't calling me at that time. And I would try to call him and he wouldn't answer. And I have got to tell you, spinning out in Rome isn't fun. And I remember 2 or 3 days of this, and I was doing my best to stay present to the gift of world international travel with my 17-year-old son and the Thanksgiving holidays being abroad. And I was communicating with my sponsor. And when I said to her, like, Bill isn't calling, he's not responding, and I'm going crazy. Guess what she said? You all know exactly what it is. She said, go no contact until you get home. And I just thought, you've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. But you know what? No, she said, go back to step 1 immediately and go no contact immediately until you get home. And I was like, but he's supposed to pick me up from the airport. Then the day before, you reconfirm your time, but you have no contact, or you get someone else to pick you up. And I got to tell you, that was brutal. And I did it because I needed to regain my life back to spend with my son, to be present. We went from there on to Venice and the Leaning Tower of Pisa. We were in the Leaning Tower of Pisa on Thanksgiving Day, and Florence, and all that. Venice. It was great. And thank God I had a sponsor who was strong enough to say, go back to step 1 immediately and go to no contact. And I did. And so it was my regaining my connection to myself and my higher power. And it was a huge, huge step. And so another one of the joys, like when we get to the point, and I think the joy of no contact comes in after 90 days. Like for some people, those first 30 days, you just might as well be poking nails in your eyes. It is not easy. It is not easy. And this program is not for the faint of heart. I hear a lot of people come in from other programs and say, this is the PhD program of all programs. I mean, heroin addicts have sat in our meetings and said that this is harder than getting beyond heroin. And so I think in AA, they say that AA is the last house on the block. Well, AA is the last house on the block, and SLAA is the shack out back. You know, and the road, we say that the road just gets narrower, but as the road gets narrower, we have more joy and more serenity and more peace. And so no contact is like a muscle that those first few days, if you go to the gym, as some of us are attempting to do now that things are opening back up after the coronavirus, the muscle, you just can't do it. And each day gets better and better. So we say to ourselves, like, stay the course and stay in. There's 2 kinds of pain. There's the healing pain. And the healing pain is the pain you go through when you stay the course. You don't contact, you block, and you don't unblock for any reason. And you don't unblock for any reason. And then what happens is you regain sanity, and you can almost feel it washing over you like a warm tidal wave, like a warm bath. Like you little by little begin to meet yourself, and the self-worth reemerges, because people who are qualifiers, they rob us of our self-worth because we're looking to them for it. And they can't give us that self-worth, especially if they're narcissists in any way. And those are really, really dangerous people. So we want to avoid them. So what do you do with yourself in no contact, right? Has anybody felt your skin crawling? You know, the feeling that I can't do this. I'm not going to be able to live through this. What are you guys doing to me? Like, really, I've had women that I've sponsored or, you know, just sharing with, like, there's no way to do this. Like, we really do think there's no way to do it, but there is. So you get into building your life, building the life that needed to be there before we discovered our sex and love addiction. Like, we had to get really clear. Okay, I called it, this was long before, this was 9 years ago. I called it my own lockdown. And it was my own self-appointed rehab. Okay. I got to as many meetings as I could get to, which now the biggest godsend, I think, of the coronavirus is all these Zoom meetings. You know, you can get to 3 and 4 and 5 a day. You can just put yourself in your own pretty protective bubble of recovery. And that's what it is. And so you want to stay in that bubble. And that's what, for me, what that looked like was getting to as many meetings as I could, and sometimes calling 13 and 14 fellows a day. You know, I think outreach calls are one of the most important things of recovery. Getting a sponsor, and getting a sponsor who's available to talk to you regularly. Like, when you're in the newcomer stage, that connection is so important. And that we're detoxing from our disease. And so it feels like it's like the skin is crawling, the discomfort is never going to go away, but the beauty really, it goes away, and we return to ourselves. We meet ourselves for the very first time. And so the benefits of going no contact and staying no contact really is, number one, that it stops the madness and it stops the drama. Now, who wouldn't give everything for that? Because when I got here, I was spinning out. And I didn't know why. I didn't have a clue. I mean, I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what was wrong. And I was so grateful to get to that first women's meeting. And when I decided it was time to come back after 14 years, and I had the date from hell with a man I met on eHarmony, and we went away to San Francisco for his birthday, and it was a disaster. And I sat there and I said, I'm getting to my first SLAA meeting tomorrow. And I don't care if I'm sitting there with all men and they're all talking about this. I need help desperately. And so I was so grateful when I checked the meetings and that there were women's meetings available, and that when you guys spoke, I heard my story in each of your shares. You know, I heard recovery that I needed and wanted desperately. And the other thing that happens as a benefit of no contact is that we meet our higher power and we get to know our higher power. And so we want to stay close to our higher power and to our fellows, because that's what our recovery is dependent on, that bond of our higher power. And I didn't have a direct connection at that time. It was still developing. So I heard God in each of you. So those two kinds of pain, I want to just be sure and complete that thought. It is the healing pain when you stay in the pain of the journey. Like, you're talking about it, you're doing your bubble baths, you're doing your hikes, you're doing your healthy eating as you best you can. Don't go diving into ice cream and cookies. You know, we're doing our best to be healthy and to meet ourselves. So that's the healing pain. And then the harming pain. The healing pain ends. There is an end in sight to the healing pain. The harming pain, there's no end in sight. Is that I thought to pick up the phone and call him would take away this pain. But if they're qualifiers, I mean, we don't throw banty around the term qualifier. You know, only 2 of those 6 relationships I've had, what I call those men qualifiers. You know, the rest were just guys we didn't have the right connection to be a long-term relationship. You know, but when somebody's a qualifier and you go no contact, you keep that no contact, even when you feel like that contact is what will take away the pain. It won't. It keeps you in a horrible cycle of hurting, hurting, hurting. You never get to break out of it. So we want to stay in the healing pain. And that's where you just get to say to your fellows, you know, this is a really hard time. I'm in the middle of however many days of no contact. And then when you break that no contact, more pain is going to come. Has anybody besides me experienced this? More pain. Thank you. We see it in our WhatsApp groups all the time. I broke no contact. And I don't say that. Thank you so much. I don't say that in a callous way. Like, we are sex and love addicts. And that's why I say we have to come to terms with the addictive nature of it, the addiction, and be able to move past that by staying in the healing pain so that we can get to the other side. So the things that you do with yourself, again, are getting to the meetings, creating what I call your inner circle of 10, like your inner circle of 10 women. Like, there's 10 women who you're in touch with regularly. You're not calling all of these 10 women every day, but there's 10 women that know your story. They know you're dedicated to recovery, and you have calls that are in the solution, like calls that go on and on about what he did and what he said are not solution oriented. Because once you get here, honestly, it doesn't matter what he did or she did or what he said or she said. You know, what matters here is sobriety. How do you gain sobriety? So sobriety is a mental clarity, like the fog lifts of our sex and love addiction. And the sooner we can get to that stage, then the joy of no contact really does come to us. And so we're able to completely connect to our higher power and to our fellows. And so the process of being able to work the steps can't happen while we're still engaging in the insanity. Like, this is a program that it's not a self-help program, and we're not a support group. And so we're a 12-step group. And the reason that's different is that when we come here and we're spinning out with the qualifier, we start talking all about what he or they did or said. And that's what you do in a self-help or a support group. What we do here is 12-step oriented. We focus on, okay, how do the steps apply to this? What step is that? Where do we find God in that? How do you see God in that? How do you apply the steps to that? Because that's our only solution. And so when we get in a cycle where it really feels like we're spinning our wheels, that's because we're in the problem, we're in the disease, and we're not in the solution. So I'm super excited to be able to stay on afterwards for a bit and share in Q&A. And I most of all want to welcome all of you who are newcomers, and those of you who might be listening to our recording today and haven't even been to a meeting yet. I just really want to welcome you, that there is another side of sex and love addiction that is joyful, and that we get to live flourishing lives with healthy, happy relationships. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share.